to the Haftorah. This one is also Lecha, which means what, class?
Go for.
It means to go forth. Now, the incredible thing about this is it also means to go in for yourself. If you translate it, and they did in the Hebrew, I found the research, it also means to go in for yourself. I'm going to write that on the board because we're talking about the Haftorah. We're not talking about the Torah portion. The Haftorah is the way the Jewish people were able to learn about their Torah portions and to keep themselves in the Lord's Word, when they were actually forbidden to not be able to even learn their history. Because during that time, when they were exiled because of their disobedience, they were under different rules of government. And in order to indoctrinate the people into their culture, they banned them from learning about the Torah portions. They banned them from their religious studies. So it was the way that they wanted to keep that in their culture, is to get smaller portions coming from the prophets and the writings that talked about the main focus of the Torah portion. And this Torah portion is talking about Abraham, but the Haftorah is coming out of Isaiah 41. Actually, Isaiah 40, sorry. Isaiah 40, verse 27, to chapter 41, verse 16. And it also comes, there's a portion that we also look at, John chapter 8, verse 51 to verse 58. And I'm going to write that down. So we talked about this Torah portion means, this Haftorah, I should say, means to go in for yourself. But we're going to say go for, because the Torah portion is go for, but this one is kind of moving forward into go in for yourself. What do you guys think about when I say go in for yourself? Personal.
Go ahead.
Personal relationship. Personal relationship, that's a good one. Anyone else?
The script. Go ahead.
That's okay, we're all here to learn.
The scripture that talks about working out your own soul salvation.
Okay. That's a good one. It makes me think about going into the presence of God, right? So originally the Torah portion is about meeting Abraham. Abraham is introduced to us in Genesis chapter 12, verse 1 to chapter 17, 27. And we discovered that Abraham, or Abram, is actually the original Gentile. He was the first person to actually come from a pagan religion and be indoctrinated into this monotheistic one God religion. So I just thought that was really interesting when I learned that, because it was like, with learning the Jewish culture, we're always talking about how do I fit in to God's culture. And we fit right in with Abraham. He was our forefather. He's the father of the nations. We're the nations. We may not be born Jewish, but we are a part of the promise of God because our forefather was a Gentile. How about that?
How about that?
All right. So I'm going to put a note here about Abram because, you know, I like to write our notes. Sometimes just little words help trigger all of this. Just like the Torah portion, just like the Haftorah, small portions of the Bible trigger the bigger picture of what God is trying to show us. All right, so just learn that he was the first Gentile. He came from a pagan culture, and he transitioned into monotheism, which is the worship of only God. And I hope I'm spelling that right, which is God. So, and that is a G-O-D. But it doesn't look like a D. to begin reading and learning about God. God's introducing us, and he's coming to this person, and he's saying, I am the only God. I'm the only living God. Because Abraham was out there looking at the stars, trying to figure out who God is, who he was, right? And so God was showing himself as holy. He wanted people to understand that even though they came from an idolatrous culture, they were actually going to learn how to worship God the way he wanted God to be worshipped. Okay, so our Haftorah starts out by showing us that God is not to be compared with any other being, any other object. He's formless. He tells us that in the portion that we learn in the future, in Deuteronomy and Numbers, Leviticus, God doesn't have a form. So he is showing us that he's not to be compared with anyone. So we start at our portion in verse 27 of chapter 40 in Isaiah. So it says, why say you, O Jacob, and speak, O Israel? My way is hidden from the Lord, and my judgment is passed over from my God. Have you not known? Have you not heard that the everlasting God, the Lord, the creator of the ends of the earth, faints not, neither is weary? There is no searching of his understanding. Right? So right there, the chapter starts, because we always, when we're reading God's word, we want to start from the beginning. But the Torah portions are just sections of the Bible. So in the beginning, God is showing himself to the people, to Abram, that he is the only living God. There's nothing to be compared to him. You cannot make a shape out of him. He's formless, right? So he's introducing us. He's talking to a pagan people, because when we think about Abram, we have to think about Abram as the father of nations. He hasn't had his name changed yet, right? At the beginning of the portion. But he's becoming the father of many nations. And out of those nations, God is speaking to us through Abraham, right? So he's talking to a people. And he's telling them all about himself, how he is not to be compared. He's incomparable. And this is talking about God. He's teaching the people how to approach him. So God is incomparable. He's formless. He gives strength to the weak, right? He's strong. All right, and then it says in verse 29, he gives power to the faint, and to them that have no might, he increases in strength. Even the youth shall faint and be weary, and the young men shall utterly fall. Right there, I'm thinking about Lot. Lot was Abraham's nephew, right? He adopted Lot, and he brought him into his family, because Abraham is their kinsman redeemer, right? Which means you're related to the people by blood, and you take them on as your own. Yeah. If someone passes, even if the person is alive, you look at them as your brother, you look at them as your sister. Your niece becomes your wife, Sarah, right? He married Sarah, who's his wife, and out of her, the promise of the seed came, right? She's his wife, but she was also related to him. They say she was his niece, right? Abraham is our kinsman redeemer. More on that later. Redeemer is spelled with 2 E's after D. Okay? So in that scripture that I'm talking about, we're talking about Lot as someone that would fall. He's an orphan because his dad died. So Abraham adopted him, and Abraham's dad died. Abraham comes out of a patriarchal society, and we learn that the patriarch is someone that is the head of the household. He's a male, right? He's the father, and he has children, and he makes sure that every child is contributing to the family. Now, if you have a family business, and for a bunch of people that farm, the first son is going to inherit everything and and take that on. And as the more children you have, you kind of break that inheritance up, right? Or if you want your son to learn how to be a carpenter, you would apprentice him out, right? Some people say sell him out, but not really. You learn that trade. And then you have created a carpenter line in your family. Or you want someone that knows how to sew, or someone that knows how to, musician, just to continue in the family line. But you're still adding to that patriarchal society as the head is the one that handles it all. The father is the one that handles it all, right? And our father is God. He's our one father, right?
Amen.
We're in his system, so we're coming out of a pagan society. We have to learn and we have to understand that it's a patriarchal society that God is instituting, and that's where Abram came out of patriarchal society. And the patriarchal society says if he dies and if there's no son to take on that inheritance, to take on the care of the mother and the son, then everything dies. So we learned in our Torah portion that it wasn't a terrible thing when Abram and Sarah went into Egypt during the famine, and he put her in Pharaoh's house, because if he had died for her, she would have been lost. And Abraham came into that land with a bunch of people that he inherited from his father Terah, who had just passed.
Amen.
Okay? So it wasn't a bad thing. It was kind of strange in our understanding. You ain't gonna throw me off, right? To some stranger. But there was a purpose behind it. It was to continue on that line. He could take care of his family and his responsibilities, and knowing that she would be taken care of. And God fulfilled the promise to Sarah as well, because he protected her while she was in that place, right?
Amen.
Come to a point where the people are growing in the land. We've already claimed Sarah back. There's about to be a war, right? Lot and Abram have grown so much because they come from a wealthy family. They're expanding on the land. They look out into the vast lands and say, you go this way, I'll go that way. You go this way, I'll go that way. Lot decides to go towards Sodom, and that's how he got lost. He ended up being captured in a war between 5 kingdoms against 4 kingdoms, which we referenced in Psalm chapter 2, okay? Now, bringing us back to chapter 40 of Isaiah, I'm at 30, where it's talking about even the youth shall faint and be weary, and the young man shall utterly fall. It's just, to me, it's referencing about what happened between Lot, because we're trying to make connections to our Torah portion in Genesis. It says, but they that wait upon the Lord. Abraham waited on God's promises. We know that. Even in the midst of making the decision for Abraham to go this way and Lot to go that way, Lot saw something that looked like the Garden of Eden. Abram was like, you know what? I'm going to start trusting this God who keeps revealing to me. He protected my wife. Surely he'll continue to provide for our family. So he decided to go with God. He waited on the Lord, right? And his strength was renewed. I mean, he probably found water to feed and to nourish his people and also his animals, right?
Amen.
So, they shall mount up with wings as eagles. They shall run and not be weary, and they shall walk and not faint. And he was walking all over the place, okay? These were nomadic people.
Right.
So let me look at my notes, because I'm trying to get more notey. I'm trying to take more notes, right? So far we learned that Abraham comes from a patriarchal society. He was a pagan that transitioned into a monotheistic culture. He was learning how to worship God, right? And he was the first Gentile, right?
Amen.
So that's where we draw our line from. Now, I want to also talk in this portion about, and we'll get there, when we're reading our Bible, we're always seeing Jacob and Israel in the same line, right? Jacob this, Israel that. Why is it that God makes a distinction between the names when we know Jacob is Israel? Is when he built relationship with God, he changed his name to Israel. Why do you guys think, because we're interactive, that they're making that distinction between the names?
I think it's the covenant version versus the non-covenant version.
There's a thought. Anyone else? It's a good thought.
And also, God is always emphasizing his plan plan of redemption.
Yes.
And
Everyone, this Torah portion and this half-Torah portion, if you say Redeemer, you're right, because I'm all in that right now. But y'all like, how is it going to connect? I promise it will. Come on.
Jacob is redeemed by God, and he gets that new name because of his commitment and relationship and consistency with God.
Right.
And that's how the people of God are. We go back and forth with God, but when we commit, he sees the Israel in us, and he's committed to getting Jacob to become Israel.
Exactly. That's an excellent answer. One of the things we want to look at is God was talking to Abram in our Torah portion and our half-Torah, and he's saying, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. But at the time, he was talking to Abram, right? Then he changed his name. They created a covenant, and he turned to Abraham. So it, like with Abram and Abraham, so it is with Jacob and Israel. Now, out of Israel, we get this seed, because we learned that Isaac is the one. I don't know if I spelled that right, y'all.
Yes.
It's probably the thing I say the most. Isaac is the seed that came out of it, right? And Israel is, Jacob and Israel, they create the 12 tribes. So that promise right there was fulfilled. The promise that I will bless your seed. I will give you seed. First of all, we learned in our Torah portion that in a polytheistic society, a pagan society, you were seen as a curse if you were a female and you were barren.
Right.
You were a curse on that man because you couldn't push his line forward, you know, which is why they had so many wives. And somebody's going to give me an heir, right? But Abraham was faithful. He was like, well, Eliezer will be my heir. And God was like, no, you're going to get the heir that I promised. And Sarah was like, I don't know how this is going to happen.
Right.
Let's throw Hagar at him, right? And we get Ishmael, and out of Ishmael comes 12 princes, right? The Arab people. But God said, no, I know what I'm talking about. I am God. We're still learning to trust this formless God, right? And he blesses us with the seed. He makes her non-barren. She's no longer barren and she has a child, right? Not yet in our Torah portion. We have gotten that far, but she is going to have a child. That's how we're here. Now, the promises, he says, I'm going to make your name great. I'm going to increase your seed. I'm going to bless you and protect you. When she was in Egypt, when she was in Pharaoh's house, he protected that seed. He was protecting the promise. He was proving himself to Sarah as well as to Abram. He says he's our reward. And then he said he was going to establish covenant with us. So that's what we're looking at when we're talking about Jacob versus Israel, right? In its entirety. He's talking to Abram, who becomes Abraham, and he's talking about all these things that he's going to do. And as we know, and as we experience in life, God continues to bless us. He continues to protect us. He continues to uphold his promise and go before us. He's a great God. He's our exceeding reward. He's everything to us. So he's making a distinction. So then God starts talking in verse 1 of chapter 41 of Isaiah. It says, keep silence before me, O islands, and let the people renew their strength. Let them come near, then let them speak. Let us come near together to judgment. Who raised up the righteous man from the east, called him to his foot, and gave the nations. He's talking about Abram. And gave the nations before him and made him rule over kings, right? Abraham was in a battle because he had to go rescue Lot, right? He was fighting kings. He was fighting nations. And God lifted him up and allowed him to get everything that was stolen from him. And that's how he was redeemed. And he's considered one of our kinsmen redeemers, right? Okay, and out of the line of Abram comes the 12 tribes, which comes Jesus, right? Who is also our kinsman redeemer, right? So let's think about that connection as well. So we're going to talk about, we always have to turn it to Jesus because Jesus is the one that gave the ultimate sacrifice for us. And we're trying to understand God's culture. And as Christian people that are raised in this New Testament and not really understanding how it fully connects to the Old Testament, We always are trying to make that connection to Jesus so that we can win them, right? Win the people who are like, don't tell me about the Passover, right? I want to talk about Easter. No, we want to talk about God's culture in here, right? All right, that was a joke. Okay, so we're talking about him, how he raised him up in kings. He gave them as the dust to his sword and as driven stubble to his bow. He pursued them and passed safely, even by the way that he had not gone with his feet, right? He took 300 to read 18. But he took about 300 men to go rescue Lot. And they won. Who has brought and done it? Calling the generations from the beginning. I, the Lord, the first, and with the last, I am he, right? God is continually telling you, you don't have to go looking and worshiping trees.
Right.
You don't have to go talking to rocks and worshiping things that are inanimate. I am he, right? If you look no further, I am he, right?
Yes. Amen.
So, the isles saw it, the distant land saw it, everywhere they went in the future, they were always seeing that these Israelite people are going to be going forward and their name is going great. They're ahead of them, right?
Right.
And their name was so great that people were terrified to even let them pass through the country, right? All right. So, we are at, the isles saw it, the nations saw it, and feared the ends of the earth. They were afraid and they drew near and came. And you remember in our Torah portion we learned that they had this battle in the land of the Shinar. I think it was the Shinar. And the valley was like, it was a terrible place to have a battle because the horses were falling in the earth. It was very bad. It was a terrible idea to have a war. Okay? But it worked in our favor. Now, they helped everyone, his neighbor, and everyone said to his brother, be of good courage, right? He saved other people as well. He didn't just go after Lot. And the most interesting thing about it is that when they got to that place, there was a point where Abraham was breaking bread with Melchizedek, the high priest at the time, right?
Right.
That's not right. Y'all know I can spell.
All right.
I have my own spell check. That's what it is. All right. Now, the high priest, he broke bread with the king of Salem, right? Who was one of the kings. It was 4 against 5. He broke bread with the king of Salem, who was Shem, right? Noah's son. And he was like, well, take this. And Abraham was like, you know what? I brought these pagan people out of this place. And I'm trying to teach them how to honor one God. I'm not going to pick up any more pagan people right now. So he didn't take them. He said, you keep what, except for what everybody ate during their encampment, during their, detainment. You take it, and I'll just take what belongs to me. Right? Isn't that so interesting? I'm just taking what belongs to me. That's what Jesus said when he died on the cross, right? When he made that move in Matthew 27, he gets up on the cross, right? He's made to look like sin. His blood is being spilled. He's being humiliated.
Right.
Almost like a worm.
Amen.
Right? We're called a worm in this section. He's humiliated. He's doing all of this for a purpose, though. Right? He's winning us back because he looks at us as his own. And we know God is Jesus in the form of a man. He's still formless. He's still one. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one. He's one being, right?
Yes.
But he came down in a human body. And in our other section of John, chapter 8, verse 51 to 58, he's talking to the Pharisees. I'm talking about Jesus. He's talking to the Pharisees, and they're asking him about, what are they asking him about? Let me flip over there. About keeping God's principles. And he says something about Abraham kept God's principles, kept his promises, and he did not see death. He rejoiced in his day. And the Pharisees say, curses to you, right? I'm coming out of John chapter 8, verse 51. It's talking about Jesus, the Pharisees are talking to Jesus, and he says, "Verily, verily, I say to you, if a man keep my saying, he shall never see death." This put them up in arms, right? Because he had not died yet, and this is in John, not Matthew. He had not died yet, and he said, he said to the Jews, then the Jews said to him, "Now, we know that you are a devil, right? Abraham is dead, and the prophets, and you say, if a man keep my saying, he shall never taste death," right? "Are you greater than our father Abraham, which is dead, and the prophets are dead, whom make you yourself?" Jesus answered, "If I honor myself, my honor is nothing. It is my Father that honors me, of whom you say that he is your God. Yet you have not known him, but I know him. And if I should say I know him not, I shall be a liar like to you. But I know him, and keep his sayings. Your father Abraham rejoiced to see my day, and he saw it, and was glad. This said the Jews to him, You are not yet 50 years old, and have you seen Abraham? And Jesus said to them, Verily, verily, I say to you, before Abraham was, I am." Right?
Amen.
And then they took up the idea to stone him, right? But he was setting the groundwork, because Jesus did come in Genesis chapter 18 when they were about to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah. We're getting ahead of ourselves, but it's written, right? When God comes down and he could physically see you, that means God has put on a body suit. And if God is Jesus, he's walking around in Jesus' body, okay? So he did see Abraham. He did see him rejoicing in his day. And when he was killed on the cross, he went to hell to go to Abram's bosom, right, and save all those people.
Yes.
So yes, he did rejoice. But they didn't have foresight. They don't know what's not written. He was prophesying into his future that was about to come, right?
Amen.
All right. Now, so Matthew, we're talking about our kinsman redeemer. So he said, he looked at these people, he got up on the cross, and he rescued them, right? He rescued us so that we would be saved, and he redeemed us. Now, the thing about a kinsman redeemer is also connected in Ruth, right? If you need further understanding about that, we look at Boaz, who also comes, Jesus comes out of that line, right? As we learn in Luke chapter 3.
Yes.
All right?
Okay.
He comes from the line. Jesus, in order to be a kinsman redeemer, he had to be a willing sacrifice. Was he not? He was a willing sacrifice. He had to claim it so that we can receive it, and he became our kinsman redeemer. And when they tore his, when they took his clothes, they couldn't tear his cloak, right? So he was also the high priest, right?
Yes.
He never passed that title to
Amen.
any other person. So
Amen.
he's our final high priest, right? And they said it was dark when he died, because God is not on the throne at this time. That's why it's dark outside, right? Jesus is God. He sacrificed himself. God is dying on the cross for us. So that's why it's dark, right? He's under hell. The veil was rent, right? The veil was torn. This Torah portion is talking about going in for yourself. It's talking about going behind the veil, right? Jesus was our final sacrifice, so we have permission to do that, right?
Amen.
So this, I hope, is all connecting. And I hope we're all, seeing these connections. And I'll keep researching to do more for you. But God is revealing this to us.
Yes.
He's talking to us about Lot. He's talking to us about having to go and redeem him and break bread and sitting down with the king of Salem at that time. And he was the Melchizedek. He was the high priest at that time. And we know that Shem was related to Jesus. So he passed through that Levitical line. Okay, so here we are. We're talking about the nation saw it. They're breaking bread, right, together. They feared them. They won that battle. God gave them the victory. He didn't take the pagan people with them, right? He came back. And it says, so the carpenter encouraged the goldsmith, and he that smooths with hammer, him that smote the anvil, said, it is ready for the soldering, and he fastened it with nails, that it should not be moved. And you, Israel, are my servant, Jacob, whom I have chosen, the seed of Abraham, my friend, right? Abraham was a friend of God. In our Torah portion, we see that God calls out to him and says, walk perfect before me.
Amen.
If you are perfect before God, you are his friend. And when we say perfect, we're not saying that you have to be without sin. The only one who has to be without sin is God, is Jesus, right? But he's saying, do the best you can and be a righteous person before me, just like Noah, right? And he became his friend. And you whom I have taken from the ends of the earth and called you from the chief men thereof, and said to you, you are my servant, I have chosen you and not cast you away.
Amen.
Now, Abraham was in the time of Nimrod, who was the pagan king ruling the earth at that time. He could have God could have chosen anyone, but he chose Abraham because he saw potential in him, right? He saw someone that was seeking. And we know he was because he looked at all the stars and God called out to him. He was like, let's see where this goes, right? Now, fear not, for I am with you. Now, this is a wonderful promise that we see from God. Be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you. Yea, I will help you. Yea, I will uphold you with the right hand of my righteousness. Now, God is always trying to show us that he's helping us. You know, he's passing, they're going to make this sacrifice. He's going to say, get all these, the turtle doves, the calves, the birds, but don't split them because I'm going to walk through that sacrifice, right? And he's showing us the promises. And he's telling us things that have not yet come to pass. Because as it stands right now in our Torah portion, the baby hasn't been born. But God gives us promises so that we can keep moving forward. We can continue to go in and seek for ourselves, right? Because if you don't hear nothing, you'll stop moving. And that's one of the interesting things when he was saying all these promises. It said, and God left off talking with Abraham, right? God always has something to say. He always has more to say to us, right? We just have to keep yet holding on until we see it done. But it is finished. It is finished. It is complete. So, okay, so he says, I will uphold you with the right hand of my righteousness. Now, it makes me think about how he swore by himself, by two immutable things, right? He made this decree, and that doesn't happen until Genesis 22. But the point is, when God says he's going to do something, we can take it to the bank.
Amen.
We can trust his words because he's the one that fulfills it. He's the only one that can fulfill it. He created the heavens and the earth. Surely, I always say, surely he will deliver me out of this situation. Right?
Amen.
Okay, now, behold, all they that were incensed against you shall be ashamed and confounded. They shall be as nothing, and they that strive with you shall perish. Now, this is talking about the Kings 4 versus Kings 5, and also talking about how God continues to bless the people of Abraham because he said, blessings I'll bless you, curses I'll curse the people that curse you. Right? And you shall seek them and shall not find them, even them that contend with you. They that war against you shall be nothing, and as a thing of naught. For I, the Lord God, will hold your right hand, saying to you, fear not, I will help you. Fear not, you worm. Right? Now let's talk about the worm. In the Hebrew word, worm means tola, right?
Yes.
It is defined as the physical worm, insect, right? But it's also defined as scarlet. And in our priesthood, we know that scarlet represents blood, right? Now this insect, this worm, and I researched this on God Got Questions or something, and it was talking about how this insect is crushed up, is ready to lay its eggs, and then crushed up, and the dye that it produces is scarlet dye. So it's connecting that passage that is also referenced in Psalms 22, when Jesus calls, let me get over there with y'all. Psalms 22, where he talks about himself as a worm. I will declare, well, let me see, Psalms 22, verse 6, but I am a worm, right? Jesus, let me tell you about Psalms 22 first of all. Jesus is talking, and he's singing, right? And in this passage he says, I am a worm, and no man, a reproach of men, and despise of the people. He's talking about at this point, he's at the Passover feast, and he's about to die. And he's talking to his disciples, and he's telling them about something, and they're thinking, oh, you're just quoting book of Psalms. No, he's like, I am the book. So he's talking about what's going to happen, and he's talking about how he's going to be humiliated and ashamed and hung on that cross for their sake. But they don't really understand that. And then it talks down, so we're talking about why does God call us a worm, right? He's just wanting us to make that distinction of being in a place of humiliation and also connecting references to the blood that will be spilled and sacrificed so that veil could be rent, right? In verse 16 it says, for dogs have compassed me, the assembly of the wicked have enclosed me, they've pierced my hands and my feet, right? The Jews are coming against them, right? They're like, we got to stone you. You talking about dead people not being dead, you know? And then it's like verse 7, all that see me laugh me to scorn. They shoot out the lip. They hurl insults. They shake the head, saying, right? And then verse 18 is talking about they part my garments among them and cast lots upon my vesture. So this is talking about that worm, right? The scarlet, the robe and everything, the scarlet color in the temple, the veil was also one of the colors, was scarlet. Okay? So that's what that's referencing. It's in the Holy of Holies. It's symbolic of blood. Jesus was made to look like a worm. I'm reading my notes. To be humble so that God could be glorified. God makes a wonderful promise, right, to us so he can be strong in our eyes because he's proven himself out in this Torah portion. We don't know anything about God at this point in a form of having a relationship, right? So, okay, so we're moving down. I hope that answers the question because Minister Shane asked me, well, what's the significance of God calling us a worm? Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
So Jacob, he says, fear not, you worm. Jacob and you men of Israel, I will help you, says the Lord, and your Redeemer, the Holy One of Israel. Behold, I will make you a new sharp threshing instrument having teeth. You shall thresh the mountains and beat them small and shake the hills as chaff. You shall fan them, and the wind shall carry them away, and the whirlwind shall scatter them. And you shall rejoice in the Lord, and shall glory in the Holy One of Israel. Now, that's the end of the portion. Now, let me look at my notes. Make sure we got everything. And I think we did. Go yourself. God is our Redeemer. We're seeing this promise is going to be fulfilled through Jesus, our high priest, who is worthy to take the scrolls, right? All this is talking in Revelation 5, right? Let's jump over there real quick. Revelation chapter 5 was John was in heaven and he was crying because he's like, they're like, who's worthy to take the scroll? Right? No one could do it. So he's in tears. And the angels are probably like, you ain't supposed to be crying in heaven. It's only joy up here.
I know that's right.
Amen.
Right? It says, I saw in the right hand of him that sat on the throne a book, chapter 5, Revelation chapter 5, verse 1. Written inside on the backside, sealed with 7 seals. And I saw a strong angel proclaiming with a loud voice, who is worthy to open the book and to loose the seals thereof? And no man in heaven, nor in earth, neither under the earth, was able to open the book, neither to look thereon. And I wept much, because no man was found worthy to open and to read the book, neither to look thereon. And one of the elders said, weep not. What you crying for? Because out of the root of David, right? Has prevailed to open the book and to loose the 7 seals thereof. Means it's finished, it's written, it's done. Jesus died on the cross, stole the keys of our authority that we gave over at the beginning when Adam and Eve were deceived by the serpent. We lost our authority, so God had to win it back, right? He had to go back and get that ketubah. And we know that the ketubah is a written contract documenting our marriage, right, to God. And in the Jewish culture, they use it just saying, this is what I'll do and this is what you do between a man and a wife. And it was to protect us, right, so that we would not be taken advantage of, right? Now, God didn't even have a concept of divorce when he came for us. They call it a get in Hebrew, right? He has no concept of that. That's why it says he's not for divorce. And people try to take that into our natural setting and say, well, let me push on with this non-working situation I may have got going on. But God was not talking about that because he does not believe in divorce. But he's talking about he does not believe in giving up on a people that are worthy to be redeemed. We don't understand why God continues to seek us and go after us and chase us to the ends of the earth so we can get this understanding. But he's continuing to prove it out. He's continuing to prove his promise. And Jesus was the one that was able to open the scroll, sign that ketubah, and get the authority back into our hands, right? And that's what this whole thing is about. Jesus went in. He was our high priest, right? It's demonstrated to us through Abram, who eventually becomes Abraham. And the promise comes forth to show us, right, that we have been redeemed. We have a willing sacrifice who has taken the authority back, and it's in his hand. And God is continuing to say, I'm going before you. I'm always going to be with you. You should not fear, right? Have confidence in who I am, right? So we always say, get in the book so you know. If you don't have confidence, get in the book so you get confidence in who God is, right? All right, that's it. I covered my notes. I hope it's making sense. Everybody, give me some notes, girl.